We have a plan to deliver the Rwanda deal. They're not listening, Mr. Speaker, so they might want to listen to this. We have a plan to deliver the Rwanda deal, and we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, illegal immigration is a huge global challenge, and that challenge is growing. It was a topic that I regularly raised with countries across Europe and around the wider world in my former role as a Foreign Secretary. But Mr. Speaker, monthly illegal migrant numbers are trending upwards right across Europe, with an exception. Our numbers are falling. Illegal migration is dangerous. It undermines the laws of our country. It is unfair on those who come here legally and on the British people who play by the rules. It must and it will stop. This is a wonderful country. And I recognise that because I have had a chance to see it as others see it from overseas. And inevitably, people aspire to come here. But more people coming here illegally is not fair for those struggling to get GP appointments, those trying to get housing or access to schools, or those people who are living near asylum hotels. The impacts are felt on some of the poorest in our society, and we have a duty to address their concerns. While the Conservative government has taken action to protect our country, the Labour Party has voted time and time again not to protect our borders, over 80 times. Rwanda is ready and willing to help. The UNHCR operates its own refugee scheme in Rwanda, and Rwanda is ready to receive thousands of people, process their claims, give them excellent care, and then support them to integrate into Rwanda. This is an African country full of potential and promise. We have a future-focused and mutually beneficial partnership with them, and we plan to deliver. The Rwanda plan has only ever been one tool in our toolbox. We have a plan to drive down numbers, and our plan is working. Before the Prime Minister launched a 10-point plan in December, the number of people entering the UK illegally in small boats had more than quadrupled. While illegal migration in the rest of Europe continues to rise, crossings to the UK are now down by a third. Mr. Speaker, we are tackling illegal migration at every stage in the journey of a would-be illegal migrant. Our plan is working. Last year, the Prime Minister agreed the largest ever small boats deal with France. We have expanded our joint intelligence cell to deepen intelligence sharing and dismantle the criminal gangs. Cutting-edge surveillance technology is in play, and we have beefed up security infrastructure such as CCTV at key border crossings across the Channel. We have ensured that more French officials and officers patrol French beaches, and they are working closely with UK staff. And so far, in 2023, nearly 22,000 crossing attempts have been prevented because of the close coordination between British and French officials. That means less money that the British taxpayers have to spend on hotels, less profits for the criminal gangs, and fewer people to process. It sends a clear message to the gangs and those who want to cross that we will stop them. As Foreign Secretary, I work closely with my Right Honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, to agree a new deal with Albania, with better data sharing, closer operational working and financial support. And in response to the work that he and I did, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by 90%. 90% so far during 2023, and we have returned over 4,600 people in just 10 months. We also want to make sure it's harder to get into one of those boats in the first place, including reducing the supply of boats. We are targeting the movement of these goods such as dinghies, such as engines, that are used to facilitate the crossing in order to undermine a key component of the smugglers' business model. And those who do make it through will not be able to stay. We have expedited returns agreements with countries including France, Albania, Turkey and Italy. We have increased the number of illegal working raids by almost 70%. We have cut the asylum legacy backlog by over 59,000 cases. We have freed up hundreds of hotel beds with the use of alternative sites. We have announced the closure of the first 50 asylum hotels, and we have passed the Illegal Migration Act, the most ambitious immigration legislation in decades, which makes clear that the only route to asylum in the UK is via one of the safe and legal routes we have put in place. Anyone who comes to the UK illegally will not be able to stay. They will be removed either to their home country if it is safe or to a third country if it is not. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that our commitment to ending illegal migration is unwavering. We are a positive outlier in Europe. Our efforts are working. Small boat crossings are down. Our decision-making is faster. We are removing those with no right to be here and taking action against those who are working illegally. We have done deals with multiple countries and will continue to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, arrivals down, decisions faster, returns up. We are getting on with the job and we will do whatever it takes to deliver on our commitment to stop the boats, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the new Home Secretary to his post. He is the 8th Conservative Home Secretary in 8 years, and what a mess he has inherited. The court conclusions today are damning. It exposes the complete failure of the Prime Minister's flagship Rwanda policy, exposes a complete failure of the Prime Minister's judgment in making it the central part of his policy, and the complete failure of Conservatives to get the most basic grip of their boats and asylum chaos. No serious plan on the dangerous boat crossings that are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk that all of us want to see end. No serious plan to sort out the chaos in the asylum system, people in costly asylum hotels because of the soaring backlog that should be ended, and the readiness to spend over £140 million of taxpayers' money on this plan, money we can't get back now that this policy has totally failed. And it adds to the disastrous judgment of the Prime Minister not just appointing and backing the previous Home Secretary, who was unfit for the job. Now, I don't agree with pretty much anything his predecessor as Home Secretary ever said, but she was right on this message to the Prime Minister. She said, if we lose in the Supreme Court, you will have wasted a year and an Act of Parliament only to arrive back at square one. Your magical thinking has meant you have failed to prepare any sort of credible plan B. Wasting time, wasting money and letting the country down. That is the Conservatives' record. Now, the court outlines the catalogue of problems with the policy, but ministers knew all about them. When it was first announced 18 months ago, I raised in this House the problems with the Israel-Rwanda deal. They were warned many times about failures and weaknesses in the Rwanda asylum system, but they just pressed on. And even if it had been found lawful today, they've admitted it would only have covered a few hundred people anyway, at a time when 100,000 people applied for asylum in the UK last year, on the Conservatives' watch, and that would have also cost around twice as much per person as deciding cases in the UK. The truth is the government has wasted not just 1 but 5 years of failing to deal with this. 5 years ago there were just a few hundred people crossing in boats, but they let criminal gangs take hold along the channel. They let asylum decisions collapse, so the backlog soared, and there are now 20% more people in asylum hotels than there were when the Prime Minister promised to end them. So will he now tell us how much in total has the government spent on this failed Rwanda plan so far? The House has a right to know. He says he wants a new treaty. How much more will that cost? And the court judgment says, despite his optimism, it says of the changes that are needed, the Rwandan government indicated that the contemplated arrangements might not be straightforward to implement in practice. And the court says the provision of resources does not mean that the problems we have described can be resolved in the short term. So again, more of the magical thinking. And what does this mean for the Prime Minister's flagship legislation? Because he boasted about passing it only yesterday, but the government hasn't actually commenced the central clauses of the law, because without Rwanda, and frankly even with Rwanda, the policy doesn't work and will just lead to an endless, ever-increasing permanent backlog. So can he confirm now he won't in fact be implementing the central tenets of that law this year? And can he confirm that this means the Prime Minister's pledges to introduce the new law, to stop the boats and to also to end hotel use will all be broken this year? And why will he not put that money into a proper plan to tackle the boats? I don't believe the new Home Secretary ever believed in the Rwanda plan. He distanced himself from it and his predecessor's language on it. He may even on occasion have privately called it batshit. But he and I agree. We need action to stop boat crossings that are undermining border security and putting lives at risk. We need a properly controlled and managed system for asylum and refugees. So let's concentrate on the things that can work. We support the work with France along the northern coast. We want it to go further. We support the work with Albania, with other countries across Europe to tackle the gangs, but it is frankly far, far too weak. We need a proper, comprehensive, massively scaled up plan to go after the criminal gangs and a proper system to clear the backlog, to have a proper returns unit in place so we can end hotel use. And instead of that cost going up from £6 million to £8 million a day on his watch, let us end hotel use and save the taxpayer £2 billion. That should be common ground. So I could suggest to him that he stops wasting taxpayers' money on more failing schemes, that he ditches the magical thinking and the culture wars of his predecessors, and that he ditches the gimmicks and finally gets a grip.
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I think one of the dangers of writing a critique of government policy before you've read the facts laid out in the statement is the statement makes the critique obsolete. She talks about hotel usage, which I might remind the House is coming down. She talks about small boat arrivals in the UK, which I will remind the House are coming down. She talks about closer working relationships with our European partners, which I will remind the House we are already doing. I've written here in response to the various questions, does she have a plan? Does Labour have a plan? And Mr. Speaker, if the bench is opposite could curb their enthusiasm and listen to what I was about to say next, I was going to concede that it's clear they do have a plan. And their plan, their great idea, is to do what the government is already doing. Mr. Speaker, which is why we are bucking the European trend when other countries are seeing 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100% increases in their illegal arrivals. We are seeing a third reduction in ours, bucking the trend. We have always said, Rwanda and the deterrent effect of the Rwanda plan is an important tool in our toolbox. We have never claimed it was the only tool in our toolbox. We have pursued, and when I say we, I of course mean my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, with me watching him from King Charles Street, but the collective we is appropriate here. We have always pursued a range of options, and as I set out in my statement, those activities are having an effect. And Mr. Speaker, my final point, the mask has slipped. The mask has slipped because the glee that I detect on the other benches for this temporary setback on the delivery of this plan displays what we on our side of the House know to be true. They don't want migration control to work. They don't want to take control of their own borders. They would rather delegate it to anybody else.
Just sorry. I want to hear the Home Secretary. I don't need the front bench. You may pull your face. The bottom line is I want to hear it quietly, because our people also at home, our constituents want to hear it. When you're chunnering so loud, they cannot. Home Secretary.
Indeed.
In which case, Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all welcome my right honourable friend to his new position. The Home Office is a great Department of State, and I hope he will enjoy his time there as much as I enjoyed my time as Home Secretary. Can I ask my right honourable friend to confirm that the judgment that the Supreme Court made today was not contingent on the ECHR? Indeed, the fundamental judgment was made regardless of the ECHR.
Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to my right honourable friend and predecessor. She was a fantastic and long-served Home Secretary. I intend to try and compete with her on both of those metrics. But she makes an incredibly important point. We look very closely at the judgment. The judgment draws our attention to work that we can do, working with our partners in Rwanda, to address the court's concerns about people being returned to unsafe countries. That is where we will address our focus, because that will be the pathway to ensuring that Rwanda stays a key element of our basket of responses to illegal migration. She was right.
No. Alison Thulus, SNP spokesman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We on these benches were very glad to see the unanimous decision of the Supreme Court today, and it really is quite ridiculous for the new Home Secretary to come here today to tell us that his predecessor's dream will never die. It's gone. Give it up. Do something else instead. And before the extremists on his own benches start to blame the European Convention on Human Rights, the Supreme Court Judge Lord Reid was very clear that it's not just about the ECHR, it's about the Refugee Convention, it's about the UN Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment, it's about the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as our own domestic legislation in this place. The Supreme Court made clear that Rwanda is not a safe country. At the very heart of the judgment today is the principle of non-refoulement, which means that people must not be sent back into harm's way. And the UNHCR provided very compelling evidence of Rwanda doing so, even after they signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the UK, as well as in their earlier deal with Israel. They pointed out that they had rejected claims from countries such as Syria, Yemen and Afghanistan. Absolutely ludicrous that those claims could be rejected. And it also pointed to the lack of integrity in Rwanda's own systems. It is a serious problem, one that the Minister claims today that he wants to fix, but he should focus his attentions instead on fixing his own department's multiple failings. So what now for the Illegal Migration Act, and for the people who will be left in immigration limbo now without any recourse to claiming asylum? This incompetent Tory government can't yeet them back to Rwanda, and it won't process their claims. So what happens to this group of people? Mr. Speaker, the solution to this does not lie in puncturing the market and rubber dinghies. It is in creating functioning, safe and legal routes. In the first half of this year, the largest group in small boats were Afghans. Afghans, proof positive that the schemes that the government claims exist just aren't working. Mr. Speaker, many people make these dangerous journeys because they have no other options. This remains the reality, whoever the Home Secretary is. So I ask, when will he stop wasting public money chasing fantasies? Around £1.4 million at least on just the legal challenges, never mind the rest of this incompetent scheme. When will he create a system which treats the world's most vulnerable with the dignity and respect that they are due to build their lives here in the UK? The Immigration Minister hasn't even given Glasgow's MPs the meeting he promised to discuss the people that they are about to make homeless through their bulk processing. So I ask him, if he will not do his responsibilities, take his responsibilities seriously on immigration, on refugees, will he at least allow Scotland to have the right to do so, because we want to welcome people to the world?
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, on the honourable lady's final point, if Scotland wants, in practical, if the Scottish Government, not the Scottish people, if the Scottish Government wants, in practical terms, to be more generous to people seeking refuge here, they can do so. They can do so. In my experience, they choose not to. With regard to the work that we are doing, in my statement, I made clear the various work strands that we are doing in close cooperation with countries around the world to address all elements of the illegal migration pipeline, including the interrupting the logistics around this evil practice, and it is working. It is working. And I draw her attention to the fact that many other countries around Europe, countries that we have close working relationships with, are seeing significant increase in their illegal arrivals, in stark contrast to the reductions that we are seeing here in the UK. And she talks about a number of things, but ultimately I'm drawn to the remarks that the court made about refoulement, and it says that structural changes in capacity building needed to eliminate the risk of refoulement may be delivered in the future, and that is exactly what we are seeking to address.
Okay. Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome my right honourable friend and neighbour from Essex to the great position of Home Secretary, and I wish him well in all his endeavours on this incredible and very incredibly difficult issue. He's actually just touched on the whole issue with regards to the Supreme Court's decision on refoulement, and their judgment was clear on this issue today. But it's not new, and it has been raised earlier on this year in the Court of Appeal. And if I may say so, Madam Deputy Speaker, ministers have had the opportunity to address some of these practical measures and means thus far prior to today's judgment. So can I please urge the Home Secretary to take every necessary step and measure to work with the government of Rwanda on the practical and operational delivery of this policy around the Economic and Migration Partnership, to give all those assurances, because this partnership is absolutely clear, is integral to making sure that we can break that model, the business model, of stopping the evil trade of people smuggling. And if we can address this principle, this will go a long way to bringing in this essential deterrent in the illegal migration battle.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, my long-standing friend, my right honourable friend and predecessor is absolutely right in the point that she is making. We will break the people smuggling gangs. We will undermine their business model. We will pursue all the various work streams that she will be familiar with from her time in this fantastic office. And in parallel to that, just as she has suggested, we will work, indeed we are already working in response to the comments made by the lower courts. We are already working to address the issues that were raised by judges in lower courts to ensure that we can prove what they need to see, which is that we will remove the risk of refoulement.
Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman on his new role? This morning at the Home Affairs Select Committee, David Neal, the Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, told us that the biggest challenge facing the Home Office is being professional, maintaining objectivity, being fair and understanding human rights. The Inspector also said that what keeps him up at night is the question of who is protecting our borders, and are they doing that to the best of our collective abilities. I just wondered, could the Home Secretary just tell us whether today's ruling on Rwanda proves or disproves Mr Neal's concerns?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is responsible for protection of this country, and it's a role and responsibility we take incredibly seriously. It is the primary function of governments. And in this statement and in the other statements that I intend to make and the ministers and the department will make from the dispatch box, we will show the House and the country that we take on this side of the House this responsibility incredibly seriously, and we will take whatever action is necessary to ensure the protection of the people of this country and the borders of this country. It would be helpful, frankly, if the party opposite would break the habit, seemingly of a lifetime, and actually once in a while vote to support the actions that we take.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As well as welcoming my right honourable friend most warmly to this post, something where his and my former London Assembly constituents in Bexley and Bromley are massively proud to see him, may I congratulate him upon the tone and the manner of his statement. Because it is right, as a law or as a rule of law country, that we respect the decisions of the courts, however they go. The Supreme Court was asked a legal question and it gave a legal answer. Does he agree that it's quite clear that this decision is essentially fact-specific, applied to well-established legal principles, and the solution is, first of all, to look at the way in which those facts can be rectified to make it comply?
My
Home Secretary.
my honourable friend, my long-standing friend and former South East London representative is absolutely right. Their lordships told us what we need to do to address their concerns. We intend to do what they said needs to be done. We will address their concerns. We will operationalise this plan. We will break the business model, and we will stop the votes.
Speaker, 2% of those claiming asylum in this country are LGBTQI+ people fleeing countries where just being themselves can be a death sentence. Does he agree with his predecessor that they're pretending?
If the honourable gentleman wants to know my views on things, he can ask me my views on things rather than ask me to comment on other people's views.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the new Home Secretary to his place as well and share his disappointment at the judgment this morning? As we've heard, the Supreme Court focused on the principle of non-refoulement, and hopefully that can be addressed in the new treaty and perhaps will be made more robust if we can work jointly with other European partners who have expressed an interest in a Rwanda-type scheme. But can I ask him, why was this not considered in the original Rwanda treaty? And which law officer was responsible for giving legal advice to the Home Office about how it might stand up to challenge in the court?
Which former law?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman knows that government legal advice is for informing the decision-making of ministers, and it's not appropriate, and we will not discuss government legal advice at the dispatch box. He knows that. The point is, of course, we do always prepare for a range of eventualities. As I said in my statement, we recognise that this was one of the decisions that might come from the courts. We listened carefully to the statements made by the judges at the lower courts, and we have already started to take action in response to the concerns that they have raised.
Alistair Carmichael.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I also welcome the new Home Secretary to the dispatch box? He's got a difficult job, but it's in everyone's interest that it should be done well. Can I also welcome that part of his statement where he says, "We are not going to put forward proposals simply to manufacture an unnecessary row for short-term political gain." That much, at least, will be a refreshing change. But he should be aware that his honourable friend, the member for Ashfield, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, is reported as having told ITV that the Prime Minister should ignore the laws following the Supreme Court decision. Will he dissociate himself from these comments?
Home Secretary.
The government, this country, prides itself on being a law-abiding country. So to hear the government's position on things, listen to the statements of government ministers. I have made it clear. We respect the judgment. We listen carefully to the comments made by their lordships and, of course, the lower courts. We will respond indeed. As I say, we are already responding to the comments they make to make sure that the actions that we take when the Rwanda scheme is operationalised are in strict accordance with international law.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Home Secretary explain to those of us who are not experts in this area why it is that people who arrive illegally on our shores from a safe nearby country cannot immediately be returned to that safe nearby country? Clearly it would be in breach of certain laws, so can he set out perhaps in a statement what those laws might be?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, receiving countries have got to consent. That is at the nub of this, and which is why it is so very important that the ministers of the department, particularly the immigration minister, has spent so much time working with those countries from whom we have traditionally received illegal migration, including France, but others, most notably in terms of the statistics, Albania, where we have developed an excellent working relationship. And this is where I will claim a bit of credit, because my right honourable friend, the immigration minister, and I had something of a tag team with government in Tirana. And we are seeing the success that comes about from pragmatic but determined relationships with European partners and others. And I pay tribute to my right honourable friend for that work.
Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too warmly welcome the Minister to his post, not least because I know people in the Foreign Office who were rather sad to see him go. However, can I try that question again? What does he think about the 2% of people who claim asylum on the basis of their sexuality because they face massive persecution and death threats in their own country? Does he think that they're pretending to be lesbian, gay or bisexual? And if he does, will he provide the evidence for that?
Home Secretary.
He will know. You can't prove a negative. That's a fallacy. The point is that in my former role, and I thank him for the kind words he said about my time as Foreign Secretary, he will know, because he's clearly got a mole inside my old organisation, he will know how passionately I pursued the rights of LGBT people around the world, including having some very, very difficult conversations where necessary. I absolutely want to make sure that those people are protected, but we should also recognise that bad people hide amongst good people. Sometimes people lie to take advantage of the goodwill of others. The point is nonsense to suggest that everybody who is suffering from persecution or claiming to suffer persecution because of their sexuality is lying, and I certainly would never say that, but we do need to make sure, as we do with any process, as we do with any system, we need to make sure that people aren't attempting to abuse the process, because it limits our ability to help those who genuinely are in need. And I recognise that the LGBT, what did I say? LGBT. He knows what I mean. He knows what I mean. Do face genuine persecution around the world. We do want to support and help them.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And listening to a lot of the Supreme Court judgment earlier today, it was encouraging, particularly around the actual principle of what we're looking to do with Rwanda being offered, and yet again a High Court endorsing that. But of course, as was touched on earlier, a lot of this turned on the facts, and in particular the facts relating to refoulement, i.e. the transfer to another country that may see those transferred to Rwanda return to a country where they would face persecution. So can I test him on what work he is doing with, we look at, for example, the Home Office's decision-making capability to help Rwanda build up its decision-making capability, and also what we may be doing with our own judiciary to look at working with Rwanda's judiciary to address some of the Supreme Court's points on that area.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I pay tribute to my right honourable friend. He should deserve to be right honourable friend. Because I know that he did a lot of the work on this very subject. And it goes to the heart of how we operationalise the Rwanda plan, because their lordships set out exactly the point he raised, and it is about capacity building. It is about professionalising their system. I've had exchanges this morning with my Rwandan opposite number who I've met before. The Rwandans are keen partners to build and strengthen their institutional structures. They see us as a key partner in achieving that, and together we will work to operationalise this. And as I say, I pay tribute to the work he did on this very issue.
Joanna Cherry.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Supreme Court's judgment has put paid to the lazy, ill-informed argument that it's the European Convention on Human Rights and only the European Convention on Human Rights that's blocking this government from dealing effectively with asylum and immigration. His government has spent 2 years formulating a policy that's proven incompatible with a multitude of international treaties to which the UK has signed up and numerous provisions of our domestic law. And the Supreme Court were very clear about that. So my question for the Home Secretary is, when is he going to explain to his backbenchers that the UK government's response to this judgment must be to produce a humane asylum policy that works, not an effort to try and overcome the vital checks and balances of the rule of law and human rights law that stymie bad policy decisions and protect human rights?
Madam Speaker, our immigration policies, as I said, laid out by the figures that I ran through in my statement, is having the positive effect that we committed to. We are bringing down small boat numbers, we are bringing down the need for hotel places, etc., etc. And I've said in my statement that their lordships have set out the route to successfully operationalising the Rwanda scheme. It is through addressing those concerns about refoulement. We will focus on what we need to achieve to unlock this. We recognise that this is a constant battle against criminals. And just with all constant battles against criminals, we focus on what's effective and what's right. The lordships have set out exactly what that is, and that's what we will focus on.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Madam Speaker, can I welcome my right honourable friend genuinely to his place in the dispatch box. A believer in speaking softly and carrying a big stick is always a very good way of behaving. Can I say to him that, no reference, can I just say to him that I also fully agree with all of his intentions and the direction of travel that he wants to go to settle this issue in terms of the proper organisation such that these concerns are therefore dealt with in the courts. And I do say to him, does he not agree with me, those who greet this judgment with glee need to remember that people are dying in the channel trying to cross in the boats. But I ask him to ask his right honourable friend, the attorney, at some point to come to the dispatch box in due course to reflect on the judgment, because it does appear to me that this is much wider than the migration judgment, because we're now linking directly to applicability in UK law agreements that were made with the UN that were never bound into UK law. Now, whether one wants it or not, that does widen the whole issue of what then becomes justiciable. I'd be grateful if she would then come at some point and deal with that issue.
Home Secretary.
I once again thank my right honourable friend for his kind words, and my focus in this role is making sure the department is highly effective in protecting the British people and protecting our borders. It's not about trying to look tough, it's about trying to deliver for the British people, and that will be my relentless focus. The Attorney General, my right honourable friend, reminds me that her advice, like all very good in-house lawyers, is limited to the client, which is Her Majesty's government. But I have no doubt that I can persuade her to meet in a private basis with my right honourable friend.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to welcome the Home Secretary to his new role. I'm sure he would want to join with me expressing gratitude to all those in our public services who came here as refugees and make such a fantastic contribution to our country. At the heart of this case are a series of asylum seekers, one of whom I know has been confirmed as a victim of trafficking. He's been stuck in an asylum hotel since May 2022. As yet, the government has not even begun to look at his claim for asylum.
So can the Home Secretary tell us when his department will actually begin to process the claims of these people and actually get on with finding out whether or not they are illegal asylum seekers, or is he just going to continue with the charade that he can make Rwanda workable?
Secretary.
I don't have details of the individual case that she raises, so I can't comment on the specifics of that, but I will remind her and the House that as part of the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, reducing or eliminating that historic backlog of case files was a commitment. At the start of this process, it stood at 91,000, and it has now been reduced to less than 30,000. So we are delivering. So we are delivering on our commitment to work through that backlog of cases. It was one of the areas. It was one of the areas that we committed to. We are delivering on it, and we will pursue all the elements of our plan.
I would urge colleagues to be brief in their questions so that the Home Secretary can be brief in return, because we have a very packed agenda today and I want to try and make every effort to get everyone in. Sir Simon Clarke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I should add my own congratulations to the Home Secretary on his new role. The key word, it seems to me, is time today, because we cannot keep relitigating this question to achieve what seems to be an ever-moving target in terms of what the courts want us to achieve. Our constituents sent us here with a very clear message to sort the small boats issue. Parliament has passed legislation to sort this issue. Can my right honourable friend be specific as to the point at which the attempts by the government to recondition the agreement with Rwanda into treaty form will elapse, and a notwithstanding clause of the kind that my honourable friend from Harborough has set out will become the only tool by which we can actually ensure that the will of this House takes effect, because we cannot allow this cycle to continue indefinitely.
I did just say brief. I'll just remind people of that. Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I listened very carefully to my right honourable friend's comments. We are absolutely determined to maintain the deterrent effect of the Rwanda scheme. Just to an extent, it is already demonstrating utility by the fact that we know, anecdotally, and I'm not going to over-interpret these figures, that we know the fear of this as part of our arsenal is already having a deterrent effect, which is exactly what it was designed to do. National governments can't just vote themselves out of international commitments, and they are things I recognise as a former Foreign Secretary are incredibly powerful tools as we try and do good around the wider world. But I give him this commitment. We remain relentlessly focused on making sure that we continue to drive down these small boat crossings using the full range of capabilities at our disposal.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State is right to prioritise, the government's right to prioritise illegal immigration and ending it as a priority. However, in his statement today, I think I counted 6 times he talked about having a plan. The only word he left out of that was a cunning plan, because his plans seem to be as workable, effective and chaotic as Baldrick would have suggested in the Blackadder series. But it's no laughing matter, because whilst the plans are not working, there's still pressure on our infrastructure, there's still criminal gangs profiting from people's misery, and and people who use illegal routes are being disadvantaged. Will the Secretary of State give us a commitment that if the European Court of Human Rights continues to be a barrier to the will of this House, that the government will take action and will ignore the demands of the Human Rights Court?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman I have a huge amount of respect for. He knows that. I know he believes that. One of the points that I took from the judgment today is it's not just about the ECHR. Their lordship set out a number of international commitments that we have made, but they also set out what we need to do to get the Rwanda plan up and running, and it's on a very specific legal point, which we are already in the process of addressing. And I would respectfully disagree with him, because small boat arrivals are down as opposed to almost everywhere else in Europe, where they are significantly up. The use of hotel bed spaces is down because of the arrangements that we have put in place. The speed of processing has increased, and the volume of processing of asylum claims has significantly increased. So there are always multiple strands to this plan, as set out in the 10 points that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, put forward, and they are having the desired effect, and we will just keep working to deliver on our commitments.
Damien Green.
Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that one of the glories of our parliamentary democracy is that governments have to obey the law the same way that individual citizens or corporations have to obey the law? And does he also agree that those looking at the judgment carefully, thinking that there is a simple one lever to pull solution, are going to be disappointed?
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to quote a very wise woman, Georgia Maloney, who herself is quoting an even more wise woman, Margaret Thatcher, is that this is a constant battle. This is a constant battle, and in that battle, both domestically and internationally, one of the real strengths, and I saw this as Foreign Secretary, one of our real strengths on the international stage is that when we speak, when we demand other countries abide by the rule of law, we are taken seriously because of our posture on this. And we will continue to ensure that we abide by the rule of law, while simultaneously, and we have proven we can do both, while simultaneously delivering on the commitments we made to drive down illegal migration and stop the boats.
Chiomora.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to welcome the Home Secretary to his new position. 1/5 of my constituency casework comes from his new department, and it is a catalogue of human misery. Just one very brief example from the hundreds I could give. Asylum application made December 2020. Interview November 2022, still waiting for a decision, has 2 young children, has twice attempted suicide, a huge cost to them, the NHS and the police. Will he just get a grip and stop making magical thinking and just fix his department and the asylum process?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I completely sympathise with the frustration that her constituent must feel, and it's reflected in the frustration that I detect in her question. But I remind her and the House that we never claimed that the Rwanda deal was the totality of our response to this issue. We made a commitment to increase the speed of decision-making and drive down the backlog, and we have demonstrably done that.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are disappointed by the judgment today, but will be heartened by the government's commitment to stop the boats. But they're impatient. As the government threatens to take over RAF Scampton, they're impatient that the boats are stopped as soon as possible. I understand his plan is to upgrade the treaty with Rwanda. Can he advise the House how long will that take? Will that be potentially subject to legal challenge? And if so, how long could those legal challenges take?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not able to give certainty on timelines. I wish that I could, but she will know. She will know that I have a constituency interest in getting this right. RAF Wethersfield, in my own constituency, is being used as a refugee, as an asylum centre. In my conversations in the constituency capacity with my right honourable friend, we discussed the need to drive down the demand for accommodation, whether it be at Scampton, whether it be Wethersfield, or indeed anywhere else. The best way of closing down Wethersfield, not needing Scampton, is to stop the boats, and we are relentlessly focused on doing so. And indeed, my honourable friend understands we are relentlessly focused on doing so for all the reasons I've discussed earlier.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Home Secretary to his position, and I also welcome the court judgment this morning. But what I noticed in his statement was a complete lack of empathy as to why people seek asylum in the first place, why people risk all risk their lives and risk everything to try and cross a dangerous channel to get to what they hope to be a place of safety. He's right to confirm that there is a global rise in the number of refugees, massively. Shouldn't all governments be working together to address the causes of that, the poverty, the wars, the human rights abuses, and all of those issues? And will he confirm that this country will not walk away from the very important advances made over the last decades by the existence of the European Court of Human Rights to improve human rights, not perfect, but improve them all across Europe, including in this country?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman tempts me to refer back to my previous role as Foreign Secretary, and I can assure him and the House that a huge part of the work that is done by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office are on exactly those issues, addressing climate change so that rural farmers in the developing world have crops that they can grow, sell and eat, reducing the risk of conflict, of persecution. We are addressing the drivers, but the idea that somehow we can uninvent illegal migration, I have to say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, is naive beyond belief. So we do have to also address the fact that people are abused by criminals, they are used as a product to smuggle, and we have to break the business model of the people smugglers, as well as addressing the issues that drive people away from the countries that they originated.
David Jones.
Speaker, may I add my voice to the general welcome to my right honourable friend. He's told the House that his department had anticipated the decision of the Supreme Court that was announced today. That being the case, can he tell the House if he's made an assessment as to whether legislation will be necessary in order to remedy the problems that have been identified? And if so, when would he anticipate being in a position to introduce that legislation?
Home Secretary.
I can assure my right honourable friend that as a thoughtful and proactive department, the Home Office, and I can't claim credit for this because much of this work was done before my arrival, but of course the department looks seriously at the range of potential outcomes from this judgment. We've already set in place the work to turn the MOU into a treaty, thus by addressing some of the concerns of their lordships. And the Prime Minister and I have both made it clear that if there needs to be legislative work domestically in order to ensure we do this, we are unafraid of putting that forward.
Clive Efford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know from my recent visit to Cove School that they will welcome their former pupil to his new role, as I do. Can I urge him to resist calls from people on his own benches to remove us from the Convention on Human Rights? Because if we were to do so, a serious criminal or someone who means us harm, such as a terrorist, or someone suspected of terrorism, who seeks to hide overseas, could legitimately claim that their human rights could be violated if they were extradited back to the UK if we were outside of that convention. How is that taking back control of our borders?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman, and I'll take the opportunity to go back to my old school and get their congratulations directly at some point in the future. I'll let him know, of course, that I'll be treading in his hallowed turf. But the point is, he invites me to be distracted, and I refuse to be distracted. I will focus on what we need to do to achieve it. Their lordships, in their judgment, set out the route to operationalising the Rwanda scheme, the Rwanda plan. I'm going to focus on what they have told us will resolve the sticking point in this. There was much in this judgment to be welcomed, including, of course, all the other elements about the fundamental soundness of this policy. Will focus on the thing that will unlock the operationalisation of this plan.
Sir Edward Lee.
But how long will this Rwanda treaty take to actually get through? How long will it take to have the court case, get the judgment, and the whole thing crawled over again by human rights lawyers? Meanwhile, my right honourable friend is a victim of all this in his constituency at Wethersfield, as I am in RAF Scampton, our failure to stop the boats. Now, he's a thoroughly nice chap. I feel that he feels my pain. And therefore, once this court case over Scampton is decided in the next week or two, will he meet with me so that we can work together to get up to £300 million worth of levelling up at Scampton, whatever the result of that court case?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm always delighted to meet my honourable friend. He will know that, of course, I'm now in a position where I have to be careful in terms of the commitments I make, certainly about RF Wethersfield. I do not intend to abuse my position as Home Secretary, but what I am absolutely committed to do is to drive down the need for RAF Scampton, RAF Wethersfield, just as we have driven down the need for hotel accommodation. I am absolutely committed to that, but of course I will meet him.
We do need to speed up if we're going to get everybody in. Claire Hannah.
Warmly welcome the Minister to his new role. The UK is absolutely entitled to create a bespoke policy, and he referred to his constructive work with Albania. But does he understand, unlike his predecessor, that policy must be compatible with facts and the law, that it should focus on the chaotic processing he has inherited and funding the public services that he says are under pressure? And can I confirm that he also acknowledges that the ECHR is a fundamental cornerstone of the Good Friday Agreement, and that abandoning it would not be compatible with the government's commitment to Northern Ireland?
Home Secretary.
Once again, the Honourable Lady is asking me to comment on something in parallel to the things that I set out, but my commitment to her and the House is we are going to focus on the things which will unlock this strand of our work. I can give her, I mean, I can't give her, or indeed anyone else in the House, guarantees of timescales, but we are already being effective on processing, on driving down the need for hotel accommodation, on speeding up the decision making, all of which are part of the basket of activities which are helping us be a positive outlier when compared with our European partners.
Sir William Cash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is a lot of tinkering going on here. Actually, the real problem is parliamentary sovereignty, and the rule of law, which my honourable friend referred to, is at the heart of this. If the law is clear and express and used the notwithstanding provision, it will deal with all the matters, as I did in an amendment a few years ago. The further point, if I may say, before the Attorney General jumps in, is to say that if we get the law right, we can then deal with what is effectively an international problem, and at the same time distinguish between economic illegal migrants and the proper refugees.
We must.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I would caution the House grasping for silver bullet solutions. Sometimes the most effective government policy is just focus and graft. And I can assure the House, the Home Office, the ministers within it and the officials will be relentlessly focused on just the daily work that needs to be done to address this issue. We, of course, will look at what changes we need to make to operationalise the Rwanda scheme, but I would urge against people grasping for silver bullet solutions. They rarely are effective.
Kerry McCarthy.
The Rwanda scheme is callous, inhumane and ineffective. One might say the same about the former Home Secretary, and that's why I welcome the new Home Secretary to his post on the grounds that he couldn't possibly be any worse. I hope that he will consider the ethical dimension of this. The court has just ruled that Rwanda is not a safe country. But even if he doesn't he simply agree that it is not workable, it is not a good use of money, it will take a huge amount of effort to get to a place when anyone gets sent to Rwanda? Aren't there much better ways of pursuing this issue and destroying the small boats model?
Home Secretary.
Again, it's easy to criticise. It's easy to criticise ineffectually, and this is what I sadly hear from opposition benches far too often. No credible alternatives, just criticism. And the point is, we are pursuing a number of work streams which are already proving to be effective, which is why our numbers are going down at a time when almost all, indeed all of our European partners, are seeing illegal arrivals going up. So, we will continue working on multiple strands. We will continue pursuing the Rwanda plan, and at a point in time when the Labour benches finally decide to vote for something rather than against something, we will listen. But that day hasn't happened yet, and I am not suspecting it's going to happen anytime soon.
Let's get briefer. David Simmons.
Deputy Speaker, I warmly welcome the tone and the content of my right honourable friend's statement. Does he agree with me that in addition to the commitment to the ECHR, which is very much treasured by the settled refugee communities in my constituency, that this is an opportunity to reinvigorate the work with France, which has done so much to bear down on those numbers of small boat crossings in the way that he's described?
Home Secretary.
I can assure him and the House that we are doing extensive work with France. I once again pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, and it is working. This is the point, it is working, and therefore we will continue to pursue it.
Chris Stevens.
Deputy Speaker, could the Home Secretary please answer the question from Honourable Friend for Glasgow Central? When are we going to get a meeting of Glasgow MPs with the Home Office to discuss those successful refugees who have been granted status? And can he say more widely what discussions he's having with local authorities across the UK on rehousing successful refugees?
Home Secretary.
My understanding is the officials from my department meet regularly on these issues. If there are specific cases, please bring them to my attention.
Ian O'Brien.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend to his place, and I welcome his comments on the unfairness of illegal immigration for those who have come here legally. But the Supreme Court's verdict this morning is extremely comprehensive and reveals not just one obstacle but multiple obstacles to deporting people from this country. And if we want to deter the small boats, we need to be able to remove significant numbers of people extremely quickly. Given the comprehensive nature of this judgment this morning, can I encourage my right honourable friend against an incremental approach? It's clear from this ruling that we need to do something stronger now. We chose in the IMA not to take notwithstanding provisions. I think we do need them now.
Secretary.
I hear the point he makes about a powerful deterrent. We are absolutely committed to that. But I do say again, there are, in a circumstance as challenging as this, there are very rarely, and in my whole time in government and in politics, I've never once yet come across a silver bullet solution. We have to pursue all our lines of effort, and I give him my assurance we will continue to do so.
Howard Williams.
Madam Deputy Speaker, wouldn't the money wasted on the Rwanda plan have been more usefully spent on massively improving the application process to reduce illegal immigration and establishing safe and legal routes to reduce the number of small boats?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm wondering whether the microphones are working. There has been a tenfold increase in the pace of asylum processing this last year. We are increasing it. They are not mutually exclusive. We are doing all of them.
Graham.
Madam Deputy Speaker, great to have the Home Secretary in his new role and to hear his confirmation that small boat arrivals are down not just by a fifth but now by a third, and his confirmation to find a treaty to resolve the remaining legal issues on the Rwanda deal. Will my right honourable friend also encourage his officials to share the data on asylum applications that are over a year old, so that with members of Parliament, so that we can prepare with our local councils housing solutions in advance?
Secretary.
I will absolutely take that idea on board. We want to do everything we can to make sure this process is as quick and as smooth as possible.
Senator Bardell.
Thank you. The European Convention was developed to ensure that governments would never again dehumanise and abuse people's rights with impunity. So can the Secretary of State tell us, does the threat of revisiting international relationships really mean his government are ready to unpick international relationships and treaties, including the ECHR, so they can demonise with impunity those fleeing persecution and conflict? Because we say never again.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, members have asked me the same question over and over again, and I hate doing this, but I will refer the Honourable Lady to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Consent.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my right honourable friend to his new role, and I agree with him. Today we saw the opposition mask slip. They have no wish to tackle this, but that's not surprising when their policy is to pass the numbers decision to the Leader of the Opposition's mothership in Brussels. My constituents are absolutely fed up, and they want, could he speak directly to them and address their concerns? Nothing will be off the table to get this sorted quickly.
The benches opposite are devoid of ideas. They criticise, but they put nothing forward. Their best plan is to do a list of things that we are already doing, but objecting to other things that we are going to add to that basket of tools. That is why I can reassure her and her constituents we, unlike them, will remain focused on serving the British people, stopping the boats.
Stephen Farry.
Thank you. Back to the issue of the European Convention on Human Rights. So the Home Secretary has not been clear on this point. Does he recognise that if the UK was to renounce the Convention or tamper with it, it would undermine the Good Friday Agreement, particularly around human rights and policing and justice? It would also undermine the policing and justice cooperation aspect of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and leave the UK in the company of Belarus and Russia.
Home Secretary.
I'm well aware of the implications of the European Court of Human Rights. I keep being invited to comment on something rather than the text in my statement. I have made it clear the government's position that we are focusing our attention on what we believe will unlock this important strand of a multi-strand approach to illegal migration.
Bob Seeley.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker. He'll agree that the control of our borders is a defining issue for millions of people. So when the Prime Minister says, if necessary, I am prepared to revisit our domestic legal framework, could we sharpen that up a bit to say we will revisit our domestic legal framework and we will do so on multiple fronts in a timely way?
Secretary.
Well, we are focused on delivering for the British people, delivering quickly. As I say, we've always had a multi-strand approach, and we will make sure that the domestic legislative framework is fit for purpose and will ensure that we can deliver on our commitment to stopping the boats.
Patrick Grady.
Madam Deputy Speaker, when and how will he know that his treaties and legislative changes are giving the court the certainty that it demands? Is he going to proactively go to the court for a fresh ruling, or is he going to wait for third-party challenges and the litigation merry-go-round to continue?
Secretary.
I'm not going to set out all the plans for how we will put this in place. We have already started the process for turning the MOU into a treaty. We are focused on addressing the specific issues raised by their lordships.
Nick Fletcher.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in addition to voting against the government 70 times with regards to stopping the boats, the opposition also speak of natural dispersal when dealing with economic migrants. This means they often end up in Doncaster, where property is cheaper rather than in the leafy suburbs of the Liberal elites. But Doncaster is full. So will the Home Secretary do everything he can to put the Rwanda Treaty through as soon as possible?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the point that raised by my honourable friend. It is often the least well-off communities who feel the burden most heavily, and it is our duty to them to address these issues, and I give him the commitment on my recent trip to just outside his constituency, weighing overboard and getting his name wrong, for which I apologise. But I will do exactly that.
Okay. Anne McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This morning I met with a British Palestinian woman called Wafia. She told me that 30 members of her family have died in the last month in Gaza. She told me about her cousins who so far survived but are utterly traumatised and completely terrified. Now, should those cousins and their children somehow make it to these shores, albeit on the only route given to them by this government, i.e. the dangerous small boats crossings, is he seriously telling me he could look these people in the eye and tell them not only will they not be joining Wafia, but they'll be going to Rwanda, which is his eventual plan, and they will never be reunited with what remains of their family?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to be drawn on making comments on specific individuals without knowing the circumstances. It would be ridiculous for anyone in the House to try and do immigration processing across the dispatch box like that. Of course, I recognise, I've seen the pain and suffering that the Palestinian people in Gaza are experiencing. We have got family reconciliation schemes as part of our safe legal routes, but I'm not going to make specific comments on individual cases, and the reason why I won't is obvious to anyone who gives it any thought.
Gullis.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork want to know clear and simply, as well as looking at our legal framework here in the United Kingdom, will the Home Secretary be willing to disapply international treaties and conventions such as the ECHR and Refugee Convention in order to take back control of our borders, yes or no?
I don't believe those things are necessary, but the point is our focus. We remain focused remain focused on what we need to do. And I've said a number of times, there are no silver bullets. This requires constant work, constant vigilance, constant effort, and I commit him and I commit to the whole House. That's exactly what we'll continue to do.
Alan Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. According to the Home Office's own figures, it will cost £63,000 more to transport a vulnerable human being to Rwanda rather than let them stay in the UK. So if the government was to scrap this unlawful, inhumane and cruel policy, how much money would that save the taxpayers?
Home Secretary.
I don't agree. I don't agree with those numbers because ultimately, no, I don't agree with this interpretation of those numbers because ultimately it fails to take into consideration the cost to human lives, of not deterring people, putting their lives into the hands of criminals, putting their lives at risk on the open seas in small, dangerous dinghies. And he should be conscious that deterring this evil trade is a human good and something that we should be pursuing. I'm amazed that he looks at it purely in pounds, shillings and pence and not in the cost to human life.
David French.
Will friend agree that it's classic Labour double standards that they appear to support the United Nations sending people to Rwanda but don't support the British government doing the same?
A friend of every country except their own, I think.
Thank you. The Home Secretary is clearly under a lot of pressure from his backbenchers on this, but can I remind him that ECHR is entwined throughout many years of devolved Parliament's legislation and indeed Scottish case law. So what assurances can he give that his government will not attempt to weaken or change the ECHR without consent from devolved administrations?
Home Secretary.
Well, with regard to amendments, when I was Foreign Secretary, I made the point that if you want to preserve institutions, they need to evolve. So nothing should be caught in aspic or frozen in amber. But ultimately, once again, she asks me to be distracted from our core effort, which is delivering on our multi-strand approach to attacking illegal migration. I refuse to do so.
Greg Smith.
Speaker, I very much welcome my honourable friend to his position and the clear determination he has shown in stopping the boats. However, speed is the metric by which our constituents will judge us. So once the dust has settled on the judgment, and it's clear whether we need a notwithstanding provision or other legislation, will he bring it to this House with the same speed that we brought things like the Coronavirus Act through so that we can shut down this evil trade of people smuggling?
My honourable friend makes an important point. My commitment, which is absolutely echoed by the Prime Minister, is that we will, of course, look at our domestic legislative framework. We will take action. We have passed one of the most ambitious pieces of legislation, and we are unafraid to do so. This is core. This is core to the lives of the British people and their confidence in the security of their country, and it is actually core to our mission as a government.
Stuart C. McDonald.
Madam Speaker, what the Home Secretary is ultimately arguing for is a system whereby rich Western countries get to pack off asylum seekers and refugees to poorer countries that already bear a vastly disproportionate share of responsibility for sheltering refugees around the world. There is zero evidence that this will work. An abundance of evidence of the harm that it does to the individuals caught up in it. Isn't the point that it's not just illegal, but it's immoral and impracticable?
Secretary.
So what would he do, Madam Speaker? What would he do? Would he just say that every person in the world is a big place and there are lots of people in it? Is he credibly just saying that anybody choosing to come here by any means, including through the hands of evil criminals, should automatically have the right? It is an untenable position. We are addressing poverty and conflict in the developing world. We are addressing climate change, which is affecting farmers in the developing world. We are doing all those things, but we are also discharging our duty to the British people to protect their borders. And if he doesn't feel that is a function of government, then he is wrong.
Tom Hunt.
Deputy Speaker, 18th of May 2020, the first time I raised this issue in this place. The Rwanda scheme was stuck in the courts for 18 months. Enough is enough. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that in his basket of tools, one of those tools needs to be a deterrent that is robust and the timescales do matter? I've had enough, and all of my constituents have had enough. This is a matter of critical importance. Does the Home Secretary agree with me?
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I would remind him that we are already seeing success, and that success is accelerating because of the measures that we have put in place. He is absolutely right. He is absolutely right. We do need a deterrent for people making those dangerous crossings and a deterrent to the illegal criminals. We are determined to deliver that, and we will do so in the face of the opposition who are desperately trying to prevent us from doing so.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I very much hope the measures that my right honourable friend has set out will allow us to deliver Rwanda as soon as possible. But will my right honourable friend also look, as I've asked for on a number of occasions, other third countries that we could form partnerships with to deliver more processing overseas in a number of those other locations?
Secretary.
So I can assure my honourable friend that in addition to the conversations that are well progressed with Rwanda, we are having similar conversations with a number of other countries, and indeed our policy is now being adopted in large part by a number of other European countries whose circumstances are considerably worse than ours. We are absolutely leading the field on this issue.
And a further.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I warmly welcome my fellow Essex colleagues to his place and wish him every success. I welcome his commitment to a tough but fair policy on immigration. The people of Southend are particularly concerned that if we do not resolve the issue of illegal migration, we're preventing people who have served our country from coming here legally to safety. Does he agree?
Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and a number of people have said about the humanity of this. It should be the elected government of a country who decides who can and cannot come to the country. It should not be criminals. It should not be smugglers. It should not be people who prey upon the weak, because that would be the byproduct of a failure to address this. And this is what we see from the opposition, a complete vacuum where policy should live. And that vacuum encourages illegality and criminality. That is what we're seeking to address.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome the Home Secretary to his place and thank him for the outstanding job he did in his previous brief. But Rwanda is a country we do business with. It is a country with a thriving economy, and it is a country the leader of the opposition's football team even promotes as a tourist destination. So, bearing this in mind, could the government consider whether it may be appropriate to add Rwanda to the list of safe countries?
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and one of the few things that the former leader of the opposition and I share is a passion for Arsenal Football Club. But the point is, Rwanda is a country which is developing fast. It is a close partner. They listen carefully when we talk to them and work with them, and I have no doubt that working closely with them, we will bring this scheme into operation and put forward that deterrent, which will be a really important strand of the multi-strand approach we have to illegal migration.
Scott Benton.
I welcome the steady progress being made to close asylum hotels. I'm extremely disappointed that the Metropole in Blackpool has yet to be vacated. This hotel is located in the poorest ward in the entire country, bar none, and the pressure on my local community and public services is absolutely immense. Is the Home Secretary able to give me an assurance that in the next batch of hotel closures, socio-economic conditions will be taken into account and the Metropole will finally be closed?
Secretary.
I listen very carefully to the points he makes, and he reinforces the issue, which I think is absolutely key. It is very, very easy for people to be generous of spirit when it's someone else bearing the burden. And the people in his constituency, the people in the immediate neighbourhood of the Metropole Hotel, as he said, are not wealthy people, and they are the ones disproportionately bearing the brunt of illegal migration, which is why we are absolutely committed to help them and the other people like them around the country by getting a grip of this evil trade and stopping the boats.
I thank the Home Secretary for his statement. Point of order, Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it has recently come to light that a Conservative donor firm has been awarded £11.5 million contract to supply RAC-affected schools with temporary classrooms. David Wernick of Wernick Buildings Limited, Tory councillor, previously chairman of the Conservative Association, has donated £71,000 to the Tories and has won government contracts with a combined total of £20 million. I wish I could say it shocks me, Madam Deputy Speaker, but given this government's record, it does not. On the 5th of September, I asked a written question to the Department of Education, asking very specifically the details of the porter cabin providers they contracted to provide this temporary accommodation. I stated clearly that I wanted the names of the firms contracted. In the reply, the member for Wantage, on behalf of the department, failed to provide a substantive and specific answer to my specific question. It is not acceptable, Madam Deputy Speaker, for ministers to reply with obfuscation and avoidance, and I am increasingly concerned that this is becoming the norm in response to parliamentary questions. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I seek your advice on how members can ensure that in future we get clear, concise and correct responses from the government.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving me notice of her point of order. As I'm sure she knows, the Chair is not responsible for the content of answers to parliamentary questions. Mr. Speaker has always made clear that he does want as much transparency and accuracy as possible. The Honourable Lady is fortunate that I believe the Minister would like to make a further, raise a further point of order to that point of order. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was just going to respond to say that I didn't know anything about the first point, but on the second point about the companies, I'll ask my honourable friend, the Schools Minister, to write to her and explain which companies are doing it.
Okay, so I think basically the Minister has said he's going to provide some further information. I'm sure that if the Honourable Lady does not find that satisfactory, she will come back. But if she wishes to make a further point of order...
Just very quickly, I thank the Minister for that response. If he could please provide whether there was any competition before the award of the contract, that would be really useful. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Okay, I suggest what we don't do at this point is to get into too many details about what is going to be in this response. But I think we've started the ball rolling, so we will await that information to be supplied to the Honourable Lady. And the Treasury bench will have heard what I said about accuracy and transparency. Thank you. Thank you. We'll leave it at that. Order. I have an announcement to make about the election of the chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Nominations closed at 1 p.m. for the position of chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Only one nomination has been received, so there will not be a ballot. I congratulate Ian Mearns on his re-election. Thank you. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
King's Speech. Motion for an address. Adjourned debate on question.
Now.
I inform the House that Mr. Speaker has selected Amendment R in the name of the Leader of the Opposition, which will be moved at the start of the debate, and Amendments H in the name of Stephen Flynn, the Leader of the SNP, and K in the name of Sir Ed Davey, which will be moved at the end of the debate. Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats. The question is that an humble address be presented to His Majesty as on the order paper. Colleagues will know that there is significant interest in the debate, so they should expect a very early time limit, if not immediate. That is likely to be 5 minutes. So I want to give warning of that so people can adjust their speeches accordingly, or if they don't wish to speak, to let me know. Question is that an humble address be presented to His Majesty as on the order paper. I call Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper to move Amendment R.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the Prime Minister opened the King's Speech debate just 8 days ago,
we had all this briefing about how it was a Rishi reset moment. So much of a flop was it that, having made promises just 8 days ago about the changes his government would deliver, now he's talking about the changes to his government instead. Another reshuffle, another Rishi reset, not change, just more of the same chaos. We remember his conference claim that he was rejecting decades of failure, including the last 13 years of Tory government. And just a month later, he's brought back one of the main Tory architects, the former Prime Minister who cut 20,000 police officers, brought in the bedroom tax and austerity, pushed working families and children into poverty, and it is a sign of the state of the Tory party that the Prime Minister who did all that is now suddenly seen as a moderate. And instead of a government focused on the problems facing the country, the cost of living crisis, record NHS waiting lists, rising town centre crime and serious violence, what we've got from them is just more of the same Tory psychodrama and chaos. Because in the last 7.5 years, we've had 5 Prime Ministers, 6 Chancellors, 7 Health Secretaries, 7 Foreign Secretaries, 8 Home Secretaries, and I think I counted right. 8 Justice Secretaries. It has been a struggle to keep count of the changing Justice Secretaries. 8 Home Secretaries in less than 8 years, and even worse, 2 of them were the Right Honourable Member for Fareham. So unsuited for the job of Home Secretary, she was sacked twice. Once for breaching security rules in government, the second time for undermining security on our streets, attacking the police and undermining respect for decisions they take in the run-up to a difficult weekend, ramping up division around remembrance and making it harder for the police to do their job. Things no other Home Secretary would ever have done. And it shows how little this Prime Minister cares about our security at all, that he was prepared to reappoint her, to defend her and to follow her wherever she led, and now we know why. Because the dodgy deal he denied last year is now laid bare in the former Home Secretary's letter. Here's what she says. Despite you having been rejected by a majority of party members and thus having no personal mandate to be Prime Minister, fair point there, this was a document with clear terms to which you agreed in October 2022 during your second leadership campaign. I trusted you. Well, obviously another sign of her poor judgment. A deal that made him Prime Minister and made him make her the most unsuitable Home Secretary this country has had. And so, Mr. Speaker, when the Conservatives published yesterday their latest Crime and Justice Bill, which has measures in it to tackle antisocial behaviour that Labour called for, I was going to make the point that they've no ideas of their own and they are just following Labour's lead. But I have to concede, members opposite, in fact the Tory party in general, are definitely the experts on antisocial behaviour. The former Home Secretary is throwing rocks and stones. The new Conservative group is making dark threats, going round the parliamentary Tory party, nuisance begging for no confidence letters in the Prime Minister. And the member for South Holland and the Deepings, so desperate to find out how many have gone into the chair of the 1922 committee, he's now camped outside his office. But look, I guess they told us that was a lifestyle choice. And while they fight culture wars with each other, the rest of us are worried about the security on our streets. And the new Home Secretary has said that he briefed that he didn't want to take over this job, but he's agreed to take one for the team. So let me just say to him and to all of their front bench, if he and their ministers don't want to be running the Home Office, don't want to be running the Justice Department and can't see how to do the job, they should get out the way and let those of us who can. Because our country is crying out for a government that actually cares about tackling crime, restoring security to our streets and restoring confidence in the police, rather than a Tory government, just chasing headlines and fighting amongst themselves. They want to tell us that all's fine on the number of police, on the level of crime, but they're badly out of touch, because that's not what it feels like across the country, and nothing in this speech will touch the sides. We've got 10,000 fewer neighbourhood police on our streets. Half the country say they never see a bobby on the beat. Knife crime up by 70%, devastating young lives. Persistent violence against women and girls across our country. And that is the Conservatives' abysmal legacy on law and order. So Labour has set out a mission on crime to halve serious violence, including knife crime and violence against women and girls, to reverse the catastrophic collapse in the proportion of crimes solved, to rebuild confidence in the police and criminal justice system, getting 13,000 more neighbourhood police on the streets and tackling town centre crime. But what do we have in the King's speech? The Crime and Justice Bill includes measures Labour called for long ago, but it doesn't tackle enough of the serious problems our country faces or make up for the damage that's been done. We support making sure that the most serious and dangerous criminals properly serve their time, but frankly, too few criminals are actually caught or charged in the first place. Under this government, more than 90% of crimes go unsolved. And if you commit a crime in this country, the chances of you being caught and punished are less than half what they were under the last Labour government. That is the scale of collapse in law and order under the Tories. So on knife crime, the measures go nowhere near far enough. On violence against women and girls, I'm really concerned. Nothing on spiking, nothing serious on stalking, nothing to turn around the woeful fact that 98% of rapists avoid charge. And the government's sentencing proposals may mean that thousands of domestic abusers whose violence is escalating may actually be let off jail. And there is nothing at all on town centre crime. Shoplifting is up a shocking 25% in a year. Assaults on shop workers tripled during the pandemic and haven't gone down again. This week is Freedom from Fear Week. And I want to thank Usdaw and the British Retail Consortium for the work that they are doing to stand up for staff safety and to shine a light on the disgraceful way people are being treated just for doing their jobs. But why isn't the government listening to them? And Labour is. We will change the law, and we will be putting amendments down to the Crime and Justice Bill to ditch the ridiculous £200 rule that stops action being taken against repeat shoplifting gangs, and to bring in a proper new offence of assaulting shop workers, because everyone has the right to feel safe at work. And Madam Deputy Speaker, on issues around national security, on some of the core issues that affect the safety of our nation, we've had in the past broad cross-party consensus. We've worked together in that spirit, and Labour will always stand ready to do so. Security Minister and Shadow Security Minister have done so before, and that is the spirit in which we will work on the National Security Bill. It's also the spirit which we would always have expected to approach the operational independence and impartiality of British policing. The last Home Secretary did undermine that. I hope the new Home Secretary will be able to restore it, because this is too important for us to disagree on. And likewise, the safety and cohesion of our communities, because we've seen tensions increase as a result of the truly awful events in the Middle East. An appalling rise in anti-Semitism, including some disgraceful incidents this weekend, with Jewish communities feeling enormous anguish and distress. And we've also seen an awful increase in Islamophobia. And we've seen the rise of organised far-right thuggery. The police raised their concerns this weekend. And we must be absolutely clear, every one of us in this House, violence and hate crime have no place on Britain's streets, and they must face the full force of the law. We must all back the police in taking the action they need. And I want to thank the police for the work that they are doing, the reassurance work, with synagogues, with Jewish schools, with mosques, the action against the hate crimes which devastate lives and corrode communities. And I would say to the Justice Secretary and to the new Home Secretary, we have called for stronger action to tackle both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and hateful extremism. And again, we stand ready to work with the government and see what we can do to come together to address these serious issues, because there is a responsibility on all of us to bring our communities together. Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, will speak in more detail about Labour's amendment later on in this debate. But every one of us will have been deeply disturbed by the terrible events in the Middle East. We want an end to the devastating violence and suffering. We've seen 11,000 Palestinians have been killed, 2/3 of them women and children, and thousands of innocent children dead, families bereaved, and parents grieving, and it's intolerable. We've seen hundreds of hostages still being held, following the gravest attack on Jewish people on any day since the Holocaust, with Israeli families still experiencing the horror and the trauma as remains of their loved ones are still being identified. And families and communities still reeling from the events. All of us condemn the truly barbaric attack by Hamas terrorists on the 7th of October. And under international law, we respect countries' right to defend their citizens from terrorist attacks, and also countries' obligations to abide by international law. The conduct of war matters. As Anthony Blinken has said at the very start of this conflict, how Israel does this matters. We democracies distinguish ourselves from terrorists by striving for a different standard, even when it's difficult. Our humanity, the value that we place on human life and dignity, that's what makes us who we are. And the rules-based order must not be abandoned. And that's why we must commit to recognising the jurisdiction of the ICC to address the conduct of all parties in this conflict. But it's also why we need an urgent suspension of hostilities, not just a short pause, but as my right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, has set out, the time and space to get in fuel, food, water, to rebuild vital humanitarian infrastructure, to protect aid workers who are losing their lives on a scale we have never seen before in conflict, to put in place protection for civilians, and to negotiate hostage releases, and to work towards a full cessation of violence and enduring peace so that lives can be saved and this intolerable suffering can end. And we know that requires immense and complex diplomatic work. It isn't easy. We have words on a page that we will talk about voting on today, but all of us know it's not the words on the page that's how this will be achieved. It will be achieved through step-by-step intense diplomacy and pressure that recognises how difficult this is when Hamas are refusing to agree to stop rocket attacks and their pledge again to repeat the attacks on the 7th of October. And we recognises too that hostages are still being held, but we still have to make urgent diplomatic progress. We still have to do what we can right now to save lives and to make progress in getting hostilities suspended, especially so that humanitarian action can be taken. And we recognise too that the only way forward is a two-state solution with a secure and safe Israel alongside a secure and sovereign Palestine. And my right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, was right to say yesterday that neither the long-term security of Israel nor long-term justice for Palestine can be delivered by bombs and bullets. And that's why it's the responsibility on all of us to urge the UK government to do what it can to strain every sinew in the pursuit of peace.
The original question was that an humble address be presented to His Majesty as on the order paper, since when Amendment R has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Secretary of State Alex.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the first duty of any government, its most serious and solemn responsibility, is to keep its people safe. Since 2010, overall levels of crime are down by more than 50%, domestic burglary is down by 57%, violent crime by 52%, vehicle-related theft by 39%, and the number of young people admitted to hospital following an assault with a knife or other bladed weapon has fallen by 26%. In fact, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Andy Cook, has said that England and Wales are arguably safer than they have ever been. And that's because this government has taken decisive measures, including recruiting 20,000 police officers so that we can cut crime and keep our communities safe. We've made robust punishments available for the worst criminals to keep the most serious offenders in custody for longer, and we've commissioned the biggest prison building programme since the Victorian era. Now, the gracious speech builds on that record with a range of long-term decisions that keeps public protection at the heart of this government's agenda for our country. And I want to start with tackling violence against women and girls, a point that the Right Honourable Lady made. That is a priority for this government, and it's for me personally. But let us just step back to reflect on some of the progress that has been made in the last decade or so. The Right Honourable Lady referred to the offence of stalking, and she said she wanted to see some progress. She will recall that in the 13 years when she was in government, there was no offence of stalking. There was no crime. We are the party that created that crime, so that behaviour described as murder in slow motion could be properly addressed. Then we doubled the maximum sentence. I will give way, yeah.
Wanted to make